Greg, you and I have been together at Church of the Savior, leading in some capacity together for going on 4 years. You came in 2017 at the same time that I became the lead pastor at Church of the Savior. And I mean, we've joked about it. I don't know whether we had a naive sense that somehow the two of us working together were going to solve all the world's problems or not. But if we did, we've learned better along the way. But I think about even just at this point, as we work through Black History Month, and I think obviously Black pastor, white pastor working together to serve a church that has been historically white, although aspires to be more of an intentionally multiracial congregation. So what are some of the things that we've learned along the way, and where that's taken us?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, right? What have we learned?
Yeah.
Right. I think if nothing else, right? And not to say that we had this naivete about it beforehand, but any that was there, we've been disabused of. It is difficult to build community.
Yeah.
Right. It takes a continual just the continual work of kind of going back and forth between each other, right? Of kind of and it's rooted really in the sense of love, right? That I want to be better, and I want you to be better,
right?
And so in some ways there's both the challenge and the encouragement, right? Of what we're doing, each and every with each and every opportunity.
Yeah.
And for me, I begin to think about and ask the question, right? What was King thinking about when he talked about the beloved community? Right? What is this notion, which I believe he draws right from the Hebrew scriptures in particular, this understanding of shalom, right? The sense of not just shalom in the way in which English translates,
not just peace,
right? But this fuller sense of completeness, of wholeness, of community, right? And that beloved community, right, does not exist on an individual church level.
Yeah.
You can have some aspects of it,
well,
but in some ways, beloved community is really about this whole.
Yeah.
Right? It's about the ways in which that a Church of the Savior and a Corey can find ways of relationship and impact within a large community, right?
Yeah.
It's about the ways in which a University Circle in a Mount Pleasant might be doing that, or a Celebration. I mean, and again, it's about the way how all of us bring together these various facets, right? It's almost like going back to Paul, right? 1 Corinthians 12, right? That we are a body, right? The body has many gifts. And I think that's not just, again, individual, but even as a collective and as communities, our communities have various gifts and graces that we offer to the body, right? But we're not the totality of the body.
Yeah, I think we strive to be think of ourselves as being complete in and of ourselves. One congregation, we want to be good at everything that we do. But the beloved community doesn't come because one church is doing everything for every person. Right. It's more about complementariness, right?
Right.
It's how the complementary parts of congregations that weaving together and overlapping in some ways, some of those things. And we can't do that if we don't also work on the relationships. If Church of the Savior, as great as we strive to be, and all the wonderful things that are happening here, if we see ourselves as a kind of an island or a self-contained one-stop shopping kind of church, then we miss that joy that Paul talks about in both Romans 12 and 1 Corinthians 12, where he talks about the way that our gifts have to work together. And then he was talking about it within one small community, but I got to think, if Paul could have, in some way, in whatever way he did, fast forward to this sort of cosmic ecclesiology of the church as a whole, I think that's exactly the metaphor that Paul would want us to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, he was talking to one community, but then he told several communities that, right? He just kept telling everybody, like, you have gifts, and everything you have is within you, and yet also within this larger framework. Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't know whether Paul ever imagined that the Philippians would get together with the Romans and the Colossians, and I don't know whether Paul envisioned that. It was not possible during his lifetime, and yet I have to think that part of this whole goal of discipleship, and I think Jesus talked about that. I mean, And one of the reasons Jesus transcended the boundaries and walked through Samaria and lifted up the examples of Tyre and Sidon as for Judeans was he wanted people to see that this thing, if it's going to work, this whole Christian experiment has to cross boundaries. It has to be cross-culture. It has to challenge us. Because if we just stay in our own place and say, well, everybody should come to us, then we've missed it. I mean, it's always about going further. It's always about crossing those boundary lines.
Yeah. I mean, I think we learned, number one, both the grace, the beauty, and the challenge of love. Right?
Yeah.
And what that requires and calls of us to be able to build community. I think that's one significant learning, at least for me, right? That I take from that is that there is the grace that is at work that we often preach about and talk about is real because it calls us and challenges us in some of the difficult ways.
I think, I wonder if sometimes people get the impression that because you and I work together and whenever we're serving together in a worship service or in any public way, there's a sense in which we work together really well, and we always make sure that that's clear, that we have a good working relationship. I think some of the challenges that we've faced as a congregation and some of the challenges that you and I have maybe experienced within this congregation in some ways reflect some of the growth we've had to do in our own relationship working together. I mean, we don't project those conversations, those difficult leanings out to other people, and we work on that internally. But I feel like one of the things that's been a benefit for me over the last coming up 4 years has been just the way that our relationship has grown. You and I being able to challenge each other and get mad at each other and work through I had to work through my own stuff and trust you to help me to work through that and just how we've grown together in that process too.
Yeah, well, and for me, right, that's the basis of friendship.
Yeah.
Right, that's the basis of relationship. That's kinship, right? That I believe that we're called to. It's difficult. It's hard. But it's also I would say necessary, and it's what we're called to do. And for me, it has been everything, right? Because it's not just one's growth over the other. It's the sense of the both of us, right? We're able to grow within this, and I believe in particular, right? That is the important nature of Christian community in particular. Right. Is this call to travel and journey with each other, and to be able to have those difficult moments, right? They don't push us or call us to give up. In some ways, they call us actually to lean in even more deeply.
I mean, relationships are beautiful and they're messy and they're challenging and they're joyful and they're all of that. I mean, that's all of it wrapped together. And I think sometimes we get into a mindset as a church that we ought to just all be getting along all the time and everybody ought to just be happy and singing songs of praise. But I mean, the most important formative moments in the life of a congregation are the challenging moments where we have to wrestle with who we are and what's our place in the world, or when we have to deal with loss.
Yeah.
And then we can celebrate together more joyfully because we've been through those shadowed valley moments that the psalmist talks about.
Yeah, we cannot be afraid to enter into the messiness of life. And I think the places where the church has done great damage, both local and at a higher level, is when we've been afraid to just enter into the message. Right. When we wanted easy answers. Yeah. Right. When we wanted to have everything be able to be wrapped up, or to be able to put some liturgical paramount over it, and hide the messages instead of truly leaning into it. Right.
And life is messy, right? I mean, I think, and where the church has gone really wrong on this, and I think that's what you're alluding to as well, is this sense that, oh, well, gosh, the world's really messy, and I'm tired of dealing with that, so I want the church to be a place that isn't political or isn't controversial. But you can't do that and be real at the same time. And I think the church is called to be has something to say to the pain and the suffering of the world, or the discovery of the world, and we can't just stay outside of that and say, because what that implies then is that not only does the church not have anything to say to what's going on in life, but it sort of suggests that God doesn't have anything to say to that either. And it's no wonder people have left the church or have gotten to a place where they don't even start by coming to church in the first place. We're coming now to the end of Black History Month, and I'm pleased. I mean, Laura's on the other side of the camera from us right now. She's gotten not a whole lot of attention to this, but Laura's really been driving the ship on this. I'm so grateful for that. But I feel like this is maybe one of those times in Black History Month where Church of the Savior has done more and kind of delved deeper into that, particularly people who are on social media and able to see all of the daily posts. And Laura, thank you. You've done an awesome job with this. I think the question that still lingers with me, and I imagine for many other people too, is the question that Dr. King asked in his last book: where do we go from here? And I wish I had an easy answer to that.
Yeah, and even King, when he addressed that question, and the title is the chaos of community.
Right.
And in some ways, it reminds me of in the book of Deuteronomy, when Moses is standing before the people, right? He says, "Look, choose you this day."
Yeah.
You can choose life.
Yeah.
And that's what I suggest you choose.
Right.
Or you can choose another way.
Yeah.
And it seems like always before us, and I don't want to make it too dichotomous there,
right?
Because even in those choices per se of one or the other, as soon as you get into that, you notice that there's different channels even within that as well. And yet, what is at the core of answering that question of where do we go from here is our willingness to address our fear.
Yeah.
Our willingness to say that we do serve a God that tells us we have no reason to fear. And instead, we can hope in the promise of God that though we cannot see the final step, right? We cannot see the whole staircase, as King would say.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we can't take the first step.
And to be fair, King didn't have an answer to that question himself, and he struggled with it himself later in life also. Where do we go from here, and do we tackle poverty, or do we continue to work specifically around racial issues, or the war in Vietnam? I mean, there were so many things that he was drawn into, and I think my guess is if Dr. King were here with us today, he would say, just keep going. You got to keep working at this and keep learning from each other and leaning into those relationships, as messy and challenging as they may be. That sense of community, I think the choice is not so much of the two roads diverged in a wood and we either choose chaos or community. I think that maybe even what he was getting at is that without community, you've defaulted to chaos. So if you don't choose to work on those relationships and to build the relationships, even in the midst of the fear that you talked about, if you don't do that, then the alternative is chaos, because left to our own devices and staying separate from each other and not trying leaves us in this place where we're just going to see it's just going to break.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's maybe part of the challenge that our society is facing today, is that people are not choosing community, or they're choosing a substitute for community, some sort of fake community, and insulating ourselves in little pockets.
But what gives me hope is to have the opportunity to journey and with the congregation that has decided to lean into community, into the challenge of it, into the murkiness of it, into that dark valley, believing, right, that God is with us, God journeys with us, and that God desires for us to make that walk. And so that's what gives me hope. That as we kind of come to the place of coming to the end of Black History Month, this particular celebration, it's that I believe that with communities like Church of Savior beginning to make those strides, that there is possibility.
Yeah, I agree. I think my hopefulness comes in the midst of this, that there's at least an expressed desire to to be more open-minded, to work on relationships together. And I know those things are messy, and it's not as simple as just saying, well, we're going to do life together and everybody's going to be fine. Right. But I do think the desire at least is there to grow and to expand our horizons. And I'm so grateful for the relationship that we have through you, because you've had one foot in the Corey congregation in the Glenville neighborhood and one foot in the Greater Heights community at Church of the Savior. It's helped all of us that know you and are around you to think differently about that. And I think the fact that that there's a historically black congregation in Glenville and a black congregation with great history in Glenville, and at the same time there's a congregation here in the Heights that has a yearning and beginning expressions of a truly multiracial congregation. Both of those are good, and I think it's that complementariness that we talked about earlier, that seeing that not as an either or which one is better, but just how do we just walk alongside each other and learn from each other and keep working on growing.